Hello everyone and welcome back to my channel. Today I'm here to announce the beginning of the Noirvember Challenge 2021 edition. If you're new to this channel and you don't know what this challenge is, essentially I will be devoting the whole month of November to talking exclusively about classic film noir. And what I did last year, the first time that I ever did this challenge, was to discuss a film noir each day, although I ended up not doing the whole month because it was insane. So this year, essentially, I will be doing the same thing, although in a much more manageable way.
I like those odds. I'll take them.
So before we start, I want to thank you all for joining me today, and hopefully we'll have a wonderful time talking about one of my favorite genres, styles, or movements, such as film noir. I know that many of you love it as well, so thank you again for joining today, and I hope that this year's Noirvember challenge really is as fun and as exciting as it was last year. That being said, I wanted to introduce you to the movie we will be discussing today, and as you can see by the title of this video, it is none other than Nightmare Alley, released in 1947 and directed by Edmund Goulding.
I just have the feeling. That's why I'm going to keep away from you.
Listen to me. I'm no good. I never pretended to be. But I love you. I'm a hustler. I've always been one. But I love you. I may be the thief of the world, but with you I've always been on the level.
When I was thinking of a movie to inaugurate this challenge, Nightmare Alley immediately came to mind because it is one of the classic film noirs that as of recent has seen more hype. Obviously also because by December this year, Guillermo del Toro will be releasing his remake of Nightmare Alley. So there is, I should say, no better occasion than this to talk about Nightmare Alley. This is also a movie that for many years fell into oblivion and increasingly and over time has received more and more love and more appreciation, and I should think that nowadays it is safe to say that it has achieved cult fame, and it is also safe to say that it's one of the most loved unconventional examples of classic film noir. So we have quite a treat with us today. It is also a treat because it starred none other than Mr. Tyrone Power. And let's face it, he is a much welcome presence in any movie. But in this case, Nightmare Alley was not only just a movie he appeared in, but a project that he really got involved with. So much so that he asked 20th Century Fox studio chief Daryl Zanuck to buy the rights of the novel upon which is based, a novel that he read and immediately connected with. He had an immense vision, thinking that this was something with which he could show his skills beyond being a pretty face and thus performing so well in romantic and adventure movies. He saw the potential in it and he fought for it. This was his second movie released after he returned from participating in World War II. The first movie he released was also a film that presented him in a new light, and he really strived to continue that path, although it was not an easy task. And it was with the film The Razor's Edge, also directed by Edmund Goulding, which is an important fact, as we will comment later on. We should say that this movie, upon its release, it was a flop at the box office, and as I have read, this had multiple causes. On the one hand, indeed, his image in this film is very different from the one that audiences were accustomed to seeing him as. He plays in Nightmare Alley a total heel. Again, this portrayal was indeed a departure for him, but also, as I read, the reason for this movie not working as well as it should have at the time of its release was because the studio, particularly again Daryl Zanuck, was very nervous again with this venture. He felt that it was too strong a departure for Power, so the studio also didn't back the project as well as they could have. And a proof also of that is that a few months after the release of Nightmare Alley, the 20th Century Fox released Captain of Castile to cushion the blow of the Nightmare Alley flop. So again, there were different factors that contributed to the fact that this movie didn't work as well with audiences at its time. But again, time puts everything in its right place. And thankfully, that's the case for Nightmare Alley. As I was saying before also, this movie was directed by the British filmmaker Edmund Goulding, who had worked previously with Tyrone Power in The Razor's Edge, and Tyrone Power himself requested him to direct Nightmare Alley because he felt that he had understood his pursuit of, again, deviating from the image that he had forged during the 30s and early 40s on the screen. Goulding himself had been an actor, playwright, and director in London when he started in the theater, and in Hollywood he got to be in the 30s quite respected for dramas such as Grand Hotel or Dark Victory. And even though he was a very skillful professional, nowadays I should say he is a filmmaker that has been sadly practically forgotten. The reason for Nightmare Alley being quite an unconventional film noir is because it doesn't really take place in an urban atmosphere, and we don't have the usual characters of the story, such as the detective and the criminal. This is a different and fascinating environment, and we have indeed a different set of characters than the ones we normally see in classic film noir, but still they truly belong to the genre, movement, or style, because Nightmare Alley is really impregnated with that sense of fatalism, the idea that the characters, especially the protagonist, are doomed from the get-go. The seediness and sordidness the movie is infused with, it almost feels like a dark fable of sorts, a dark cautionary tale about the severe implications of deception. And the fascination comes within this context with the juxtaposition of the idea of playing a monster versus being a monster. And I think that's what the story and the movie captures so well, something that I think Tyrone Power portrays to perfection. I think he really understood this, what makes a person a monster. This is a kind of character that he returned to in Billy Wilder's Witness for the Prosecution, even though for that picture he plays a supporting part. So the movie to experience that in its full potential is definitely Nightmare Alley. Although, as I was saying, I think Witness for the Prosecution is another terrific film in which Tyrone Power does a tremendous job. Of course, in Witness for the Prosecution, we also have Marlene Dietrich, and we have Charles Laughton and Elsa Lanchester. So there is more competition to see who's best. But in Nightmare Alley, he definitely is the focus of the story, even though he has some of the most wonderful supporting cast, especially the women. To begin with, we have Joan Blondell. We also have Colleen Gray in the film and Helen Walker. They are all outstanding. These three women play different important parts in the story, and they represent in a way different archetypes that we are indeed used to seeing in classic film noir, taking a different form. And again, they play, as I said, important parts not only within the telling of the story, but also, in my opinion, in a symbolic way. Even the name of Helen Walker's character, Lilith, which has in itself dangerous connotations. There's obviously the whole imaginary of the tarot cards that Xena herself uses to read Tyrone Power's character. And even though I believe in the novel upon which it's based, it uses even further that imaginary of the tarot cards, the major arcana specifically, to name the titles of each chapter. In this case, they very vividly and also symbolically represent the fate of the character in the story of Nightmare Alley. Also, it is one of those films that, aside from being very unconventional, film noir speaking, it also has a very pessimistic and dark view on humankind. And that makes me think that it is no wonder that Guillermo del Toro felt also connected to the story, because it feels in many ways a mixture of fantasy, of horror, and of film noir, and also of a fascinating dark fable led by a very charismatic, very magnetic Tyrone Power. Something that particularly fascinates me is how the movie exposes how easy it is to trick and to manipulate people when you have someone with enough magnetic pull and expertise to build your trust. That is something quite scary but fascinating at the same time. It is something that we see in many movies, particularly in those that play with psychological horror or psychological thrillers, but it is nevertheless still quite relevant when we have people who can also perform and manipulate. So it is again quite a fascinating and particularly scary thing to realize, and I believe in, again, Tyrone Power's hand has never been more fantastically exposed. In talking about psychology, as we've explored in another video with the relationship between psychoanalysis and film noir, Nightmare Alley is one of those cases in which this discipline is shown in a very unflattering light. This is something that we can also see in movies like Shock, released in 1946, or Whirlpool, released in 1950. The novel was expertly adapted for the screen by screenwriter Jules Forthman, one of the most prolific screenwriters of his time. He worked several times with Howard Hawks in also literary adaptations such as Only Angels Have Wings or To Have and Have Not. It would be fair to say that he was indeed an expert at doing that transition from book to film. For Nightmare Alley, he had the arduous task of maintaining the tone that the novel has while also abiding to the Hays Code's requirements. But Forthman proved to be a very skilled professional, and this is certainly considered one of his finest achievements. A classic in this Noirvember challenge videos is definitely mentioning the cinematography, and definitely Nightmare Alley's success nowadays relies precisely on its photography by Lee Garms. He was a pioneer, innovator, and a veteran by the time he worked in Nightmare Alley. There is definitely a fantastic chiaroscuro, fantastic contrast of light and shadow in this film that does indeed create the best atmosphere this movie needed. And this is certainly one of those films that I would really love to see on the big screen. That is why I, for one, I'm very much intrigued and looking forward to what Guillermo del Toro does with his adaptation. But in the meantime, we have the original to appreciate and to relish, which I really encourage you to go watch if you haven't already. So that's all for today's video. I hope that you enjoyed it. I hope that you enjoyed this first video of the Noirvember challenge. And again, thank you so much for joining. Thank you so much for watching classic films, and I hope that we'll continue to have fun here with more film noir, which is a topic that I adore. So as always, take care, stay safe, and see you all for another video. Bye!